This story is titled, My Parents Knew My Golden Brother Impregnated My Fiancé, but they took his side and protected him, pretending the baby was mine until I did a DNA test, exposed the truth, and cut them all off. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 33 years old. I'm still processing this situation months later, but I figure other guys should know what warning signs to watch for. I was working hard to set up a future for my family, completely focused on building something lasting and meaningful. What I didn't realize was that while I was grinding away, my younger brother was sleeping with my wife. And my mom knew about it the entire time and was actively covering it up. They wanted me to raise a baby that wasn't even mine. I didn't burn their lives down when I found out. I let them burn themselves. Here's exactly how it all went down. I've changed the names for obvious reasons, but every detail of this story is completely true. I'm a 33-year-old male working as an operations supervisor at my dad's industrial contracting company here in Tampa. I've been married to Victoria for 6 years now. We're making decent money, plus bonuses, and I've been working in manufacturing since I was 16 years old. I've earned every single promotion through actual hard work, not politics or favoritism. I owned my house outright with no debt except the mortgage, and I'd been aggressively paying that down for years. I bought the place for $310,000 4 years before I got married, and it's worth about $420,000 now. My wife Victoria is 27 years old and works as a nurse, making around $68,000 annually. I met her at a sports bar near the hospital when she was finishing nursing school. She was decent looking and seemed normal, had her life together, seemed responsible and mature. I genuinely thought I'd found a keeper, someone I could build a real future with. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to how she flirted with the bartender during our very first date. That should have been a red flag right there. Let me tell you about the family dynamics, because understanding these relationships is crucial to understanding how this whole mess unfolded. My dad, Vincent, is 58 years old and built his contracting company from absolutely nothing. He started working machinery when he was just 19, saved every single dollar he made, and took night classes to get his contractor's license. He spent his entire 20s and 30s grinding on residential jobs, slowly building his reputation and client base one project at a time. By 42, he was finally landing commercial contracts, and now he runs crews doing million-dollar jobs. He's a real old-school guy who believes you earn what you get through hard work and dedication. He respects people who put in effort and has zero tolerance for excuses or laziness. My mom, Patricia, is 52 years old and retired from some pencil-pushing administrative job at the school district. These days, she spends her time shopping with dad's money and gossiping with her church friends. She's the type of person who demands to speak to managers and acts like the world revolves around her precious baby boy. She pretends to be some kind of saint, always talking about Christian values and family, but she gossips about everyone behind their backs and creates drama wherever she goes. Then there's Tyler, my younger brother, who's 24 years old and has always been mom's golden child. He's a pretty boy with perfect hair who's never worked a real day in his life and thinks he's God's gift to humanity. He started working in dad's office doing basic filing and customer service calls, making $52,000 a year. But dad had been slowly giving him more responsibility over time, hoping he'd eventually grow up and become a man. Tyler has this smug attitude, like he's doing everyone a favor just by showing up to work. Here's what you need to understand about the family dynamics that shaped this entire situation. My dad tried for years to make Tyler into a man, to teach him the value of hard work and personal responsibility. He had Tyler working summer jobs at manufacturing sites starting when he was just 17 years old, hoping that manual labor would build some character and work ethic. But Tyler would consistently show up late, complain constantly about the heat, and find every possible excuse to hide in the air-conditioned truck while everyone else was busting their asses in the Florida sun. I remember one specific incident that really showed Tyler's true character when he was 20 years old. Dad had him working on a welding crew in the middle of August. We're talking about Tampa summer heat, 108 degrees with crushing humidity. This kid lasted exactly 3 hours before claiming he felt dizzy and needed to go home. Meanwhile, the rest of us worked a full 11-hour day in those same brutal conditions. Dad was embarrassed as hell, especially when the crew started making jokes about his soft son who couldn't handle real work. While Tyler was finding excuses to avoid anything challenging, I was learning every single trade in the business. Electrical work, plumbing, metal fabrication, concrete, assembly work, you name it, I learned it. I started at the very bottom, cleaning tools and organizing materials, and worked my way up through every single position in the company. Dad taught me that respect is earned, not given, and that nothing comes free in this world. You have to prove yourself every single day. By the time I was 21, I was running my own crews on residential projects. Dad promoted me to operations supervisor when I was 25, not because I was his son, but because I actually got things done and didn't cost him money. In my role, I coordinate with subcontractors, deal with city inspectors, handle budgets and timelines, and make sure projects come in on time and under budget. It's real responsibility with real consequences. Meanwhile, Dad finally gave up on getting Tyler to do manual labor and stuck him in the office doing paperwork and customer service calls. Over the past year, Dad had started giving Tyler more responsibility, things like initial estimates for small residential jobs, coordinating with suppliers on materials orders, and handling some of the easier commercial clients. But this guy acts like he's some kind of executive just because he answers phones and fills out forms. Tyler shows up to work in expensive clothes that cost more than most people make in a week and drives a leased Audi that costs more than most people's rent. The resentment was always obvious, even at family gatherings. Every family dinner, Mom would praise Tyler for some completely meaningless accomplishment, like showing up to work on time for a week straight, while I had just finished overseeing a $900,000 warehouse project that came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Dad noticed this favoritism, but kept quiet to avoid fights with Mom. Tyler's always been jealous of my success, and he's never been subtle about it. When I bought my house, he made snide comments about how some people get all the luck. When Dad promoted me to operations supervisor, Tyler complained that it was just nepotism, conveniently ignoring the fact that I'd been busting my ass for 12 years while he was playing video games and living off Mom and Dad's money. 3 years ago, Tyler got himself into some serious financial trouble, credit card debt, car payments he couldn't handle. All the usual nonsense that happens when you live way beyond your means and think money grows on trees. Dad bailed him out with an $18,000 loan that was supposed to be paid back over 2 years. Tyler made maybe 4 payments before the excuses started rolling in, and he basically stopped paying Dad back entirely while continuing to live his expensive lifestyle. The first couple of years with Victoria were honestly solid. We had our routines down, and everything felt like it was moving in the right direction. I handled all the house maintenance and finances while she managed our social life and did most of the cooking. We were both working hard and building something together, making real plans for our future. We talked constantly about having kids and starting a family. Victoria was actually a really good cook, and she made these amazing Wednesday dinners that reminded me of my grandmother's cooking. Those meals became something I looked forward to every week. It felt like we were creating our own family traditions. Victoria worked a standard hospital schedule of 3 12-hour shifts per week, usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This gave us predictable time together and made planning our lives much easier than if she'd had some chaotic, constantly changing schedule. We'd agreed to start trying for a baby after our 4th anniversary, which was in September 2022. Victoria went off birth control that month, and we were tracking everything meticulously. We were completely committed to starting a family. This wasn't some casual decision. We did all the normal married couple stuff, reading about fertility and timing, making sure we were doing everything right. We even picked out names we loved. Isabella for a girl, and Vincent Jr. for a boy named after my dad. Everything changed around February 2023 when Dad landed this massive hospital renovation contract downtown. This was a 7-month project worth $2.3 million, the biggest job in our company's history. It was a complete gut renovation of a 1970s hospital, bringing everything up to modern standards and current building codes. Dad put me in charge of the entire project because I'd successfully managed the medical center project in Clearwater the year before, and he trusted me to handle something this important. Hospital work is a completely different beast from regular construction. Everything has to be absolutely perfect because you're dealing with people's lives and health. There are regulations coming out of your ears, and you have inspectors crawling up your back every single day, acting like they're performing brain surgery instead of checking electrical work. I was basically married to that job site, working 13-hour days minimum, and spending weekends dealing with change orders and city inspectors who seemed to think their job was to make my life as difficult as possible. Victoria understood the pressure initially and was actually really supportive. She'd bring me dinner at the site sometimes when I was working late, and she knew this project could set us up financially for life. Successful completion meant a partnership in the company, a significant pay bump, and maybe even franchising opportunities in other cities. We talked about using the bonus to pay off the house completely and start looking at investment properties. This was our chance to really secure our future and build generational wealth. That's exactly when Victoria started hanging around with Jessica, this traveling nurse who was doing a rotation at her hospital. According to Victoria, Jessica was single and adventurous and knew all the cool spots in Tampa that I'd never heard of. Suddenly, Victoria was going out 4 nights a week instead of staying home watching Netflix with me like we'd done for years. I was too buried in concrete schedules and electrical inspections to notice the changes that were happening right under my nose. Looking back now, that's exactly when everything started falling apart. But I was so focused on delivering this project successfully that I missed all the warning signs. Victoria's schedule became complete chaos around March, and that should have been my first major red flag. She'd always worked those 3 12-hour shifts, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we'd built our entire marriage around that predictable routine. But suddenly, she was constantly picking up overtime shifts, covering for sick colleagues, and attending mandatory training sessions that supposedly came out of nowhere. Her base schedule stayed the same on paper, but she was working 6 or 7 days a week instead of 3. The woman who used to cherish her days off was suddenly never home. Around the same exact time, Tyler started showing up at our house when I wasn't there. I'd come home completely exhausted at 9 p.m. after a brutal day dealing with inspectors and subcontractors, and Victoria would casually mention that Tyler had stopped by to check on her. He'd bring her coffee from that expensive place downtown or help fix some minor thing around the house that I'd been meaning to get to but hadn't had time for because of work. At first, I actually thought it was nice. Tyler was finally acting like family instead of a spoiled brat who only cared about himself. Maybe having more responsibility at work was finally maturing him into a decent human being. At the company, Tyler was actually stepping up for once in his life. He started dressing more professionally instead of like he was heading to a nightclub, showing up on time consistently, and even volunteering for weekend work on inventory and filing. Dad mentioned several times that Tyler was finally growing up and taking things seriously. I was honestly proud of him and thought maybe he was finally becoming the man Dad had always hoped he could be. When the hospital project wrapped up in late April 2023, I expected things to return to normal with Victoria. The project had been a massive success. We came in $65,000 under budget and earned the company a reputation bonus that Dad was already talking about investing in new equipment. I thought we could finally get back to our regular routine and focus on starting our family like we'd planned. Except normal had been completely redefined while I was working 75-hour weeks and pouring everything into that project. Victoria's schedule was still complete chaos with those same overtime shifts, mandatory training sessions, and coworker emergencies that required her immediate attention. But now that I was home more and could actually pay attention to what was going on, I started noticing things that didn't add up at all. The financial irregularities hit me first, and they were impossible to ignore once I started looking. Victoria had been withdrawing exactly $250 in cash every Thursday for 3 months straight. When I asked her about it, she said girls' nights were getting expensive, and she preferred cash to avoid overspending on the credit card. That made sense superficially, since we'd always been careful about credit card debt and tracked our spending together. But we'd been monitoring every expense together for 6 years of marriage. And this was the first time she'd made regular cash withdrawals without discussing it with me first. The physical symptoms started around early May, though I didn't know that's what they were at the time. Victoria was getting sick every morning like clockwork. I'd hear her in the bathroom at 6:30 a.m. throwing up, then the shower running for an unusually long time. One morning, I got up to check on her and found her kneeling over the toilet looking absolutely miserable. I suggested maybe she was pregnant, and I watched her face go white with what looked like pure terror. She insisted it was just a stomach bug going around the hospital and said half the nurses were dealing with the same thing. She made a doctor's appointment, but specifically told me not to come because it wasn't worth me missing work for something minor. Here's the thing. I'd been tracking her cycle on my phone app since October when she went off birth control. We were actively trying to conceive, so I monitored everything carefully. Ovulation dates, cycle length, optimal timing for conception. She was 4 weeks late, which had never happened once in our entire relationship. But when I mentioned the missed period to Victoria, she got defensive and angry in a way that caught me completely off guard. She snapped at me, saying, "Why are you tracking my period like some creepy stalker? I can handle my own body, Marcus. Stop micromanaging everything in my life." That reaction was way out of proportion to what should have been a normal conversation between married couples who were actively trying to get pregnant. We'd been discussing cycles and timing for months without any issues whatsoever, so her sudden hostility made absolutely no sense. Mom's behavior shifted around the same exact time, which should have been another massive red flag that I completely missed. Instead of calling our landline like she had for years, she started calling Victoria's cell phone directly. They'd have these long conversations where Victoria would leave the room and talk in hushed tones for 35 to 45 minutes at a time. I'd see her pacing around the backyard or locked in our bedroom, speaking in whispers like she was discussing state secrets. Sometimes I'd catch fragments of conversation through the door, things about checking on that situation, or making sure everything is handled properly, or he can't find out about this. Since when did my wife and mother have private conversations that couldn't include me? They'd barely tolerated each other for the first 5 years of my marriage, so this sudden closeness was completely out of character. Once I walked into the kitchen while they were on speakerphone together. Mom immediately said, "Oh, Marcus is home. We'll continue this later," and hung up. The tone was exactly like they'd been caught planning some kind of surprise party, except my birthday wasn't for 7 months and there were no holidays coming up. Victoria's work stories stopped making sense when I started paying close attention to the details. She'd come home claiming to have worked a double shift, but she'd be completely energetic instead of exhausted like she usually was after those brutal 16-hour days. Or she'd say she'd been in surgery assisting with a trauma case, but there'd be no blood or antiseptic smell on her scrubs like there usually was after intense procedures. These little inconsistencies started adding up in ways that made my stomach turn. The breaking point came on a Monday in mid-May when my truck wouldn't start. I had to catch a ride home with Rodriguez, one of my foremen, and ended up leaving work early around 3 p.m. instead of my usual 8 p.m. I walked through the front door and heard voices in the living room. Victoria laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months, completely relaxed and happy like she didn't have a care in the world. Tyler was sitting on my couch next to my wife, closer than any brother-in-law should ever be. They weren't quite touching, but they were in that intimate space that couples occupy when they're completely comfortable with each other. When I appeared in the doorway, they both jumped apart like they'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Victoria actually asked, "What are you doing here?" Like I was some kind of intruder in my own house. Tyler spilled his coffee, jumping up from the couch, and made some bullshit excuse about being in the neighborhood and wanting to check on Victoria since I'd been working so much lately. The whole interaction felt wrong. Way too much nervous energy for what should have been a normal family visit. Tyler said, "Just wanted to make sure she's okay, you know? You've been so busy with work lately, thought she might need some company." Tyler's smile was too forced, and Victoria kept fidgeting with her hair and wouldn't make eye contact with me. She said, "Tyler brought me coffee from that place downtown. Wasn't that sweet?" But her voice had this guilty tone like a teenager who'd been caught sneaking out. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was very wrong. The changed schedules, secret phone calls, pregnancy symptoms, Tyler's sudden interest in being a caring brother-in-law. There were too many anomalies to ignore. I started going through interactions from the past few months in my head, realizing how many things hadn't added up that I'd dismissed because I was so focused on work. I decided it was time to do some serious digging the next day. I started with company records since Tyler had access to job sites and vehicles through our fleet management system. I decided to check the GPS logs on his work truck for the past 4 months, cross-referencing locations and timestamps with his official work assignments. What I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of stops at locations that had absolutely nothing to do with any work assignments Tyler was supposed to be handling. His truck had been in my neighborhood during work hours when I was supposed to be the only family member home. There were visits to a hotel in Clearwater, restaurants in parts of town where we had no active projects, and other locations that made no sense for someone who was supposed to be doing office work and customer service calls. I cross-referenced those dates and times with Victoria's claimed work schedule using the calendar app we shared for coordinating our lives. The pattern became obvious fast, and it made me sick to my stomach. Every single time Tyler's truck was in my area or at one of these suspicious locations, Victoria had supposedly picked up an extra shift or was dealing with some workplace emergency that required her immediate attention. The correlation was too perfect to be coincidence. This was clearly coordinated. Next, I checked our joint bank account more carefully, going back 5 months instead of just looking at recent transactions like I normally did. The cash withdrawals weren't random like Victoria had claimed. They happened every Thursday like clockwork, always exactly $250. But I also found charges at restaurants and hotels in Clearwater on days when Victoria claimed to be working doubles at the hospital. There was a $195 charge at Morton's Steakhouse on a Tuesday when she was supposedly working a 13-hour shift. A $240 charge at the Ritz-Carlton for afternoon tea on a Wednesday when she claimed to be in mandatory training. A $110 charge at some boutique hotel restaurant for brunch on a Saturday when she said she was covering for a sick colleague. These weren't small expenses. These were the kind of charges you make when you're trying to impress someone and money is no object. I started keeping a detailed log, documenting every single discrepancy between her claim schedule and our financial records. The pattern was undeniable once I laid it all out on paper. Victoria was lying about where she was and what she was doing, and she was spending significant money doing it. That's when I knew I had to check her email, even though it meant crossing every line of privacy we'd established in our marriage. Wednesday afternoon, Victoria was at what she claimed was a mandatory safety training session about new equipment. I stayed home with a fake stomach bug, telling her I felt too sick to go to work. I sat at our home computer with my heart pounding and my hands actually shaking, knowing that what I might find could destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I opened her email account using the password we'd always shared, T Medina 2020, from our last anniversary trip to Key West. Right at the top of her inbox was a conversation thread between Victoria and my mother with the subject line, "Making sure Marcus doesn't find out." My hands started trembling just seeing those words. What the hell were they hiding from me? I clicked on the thread and found 4 months of detailed emails discussing Victoria's affair with Tyler. The early messages from March were tentative, with Mom asking if Victoria was sure about this and warning her to be careful, suggesting maybe it was just a phase that would pass. But they got bolder and more detailed quickly, and reading them made me physically sick. My own mother was giving step-by-step instructions on how to lie to me. She was telling Victoria exactly when to fake extra shifts, what excuses would sound most believable, and even offering her house as a meeting place when Dad was playing golf or working late at the office. One email from April made my stomach turn. Vincent always plays golf Wednesday afternoons until 7 o'clock, so you have at least 5 hours if you park in the back driveway. Tyler can use the side entrance by the garage. I'll make sure the neighbors don't see anything unusual. Another one said, "Tell Marcus you're working a double Monday night. Vincent has that contractor's meeting until 11 p.m. so the house will be empty. Tyler already told his roommate he's staying overnight at a job site." My mother was literally coordinating my wife's affair with my brother, planning out every detail to make sure I wouldn't catch them. Then came the pregnancy emails from mid-May that made everything so much worse. Victoria was 9 weeks along, confirmed by her gynecologist, Dr. Martinez. They weren't sure if the baby was mine or Tyler's because the timing overlapped with both relationships. Reading that made me feel like I was going to throw up right there at my own computer. My mother's response was the most disgusting part of this entire nightmare. She told Victoria to pass the baby off as mine regardless of who the actual father was. Her exact words were that I'd be a better father than Tyler anyway, and that what I don't know won't hurt me. Another email from Mom said, "Tyler isn't ready for the responsibility anyway. Marcus has the house, the stable job, the maturity. Just let him think it's his, and everyone wins. Tyler gets to keep having fun, you get financial security, and Marcus gets the family he's always wanted." Victoria's response was equally sickening. But what if Marcus finds out later? What if the baby looks like Tyler? My mother's reply showed just how calculated and evil this whole thing was. We'll deal with that if it happens. For now, just focus on making Marcus think everything is normal. Keep having sex with him regularly so the timing makes sense. I sat there for 3 hours, reading every single email, getting sicker and more furious with each message. These people had been planning to destroy my life for months, and they thought they were smart enough to get away with it. I took screenshots of everything, saved copies to a USB drive, and printed out the most damaging ones. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely clear and focused. I knew exactly what I had to do. I called Dad immediately. Dad, I need to see you at the office right now. Emergency family situation. Can't discuss it over the phone. 25 minutes later, I was sitting in his office showing him everything. The emails, the GPS logs, the bank records, the whole sordid story. I told him about Victoria, Tyler, the pregnancy, and Mom's involvement in orchestrating and covering up this entire betrayal. There was a long silence while Dad processed what I was telling him. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm in a way that actually scared me. Son, this is war now. Meet me at David's office in 3 hours. Don't say anything to anyone until we figure this out legally. Dad and I sat in David Chen's law office going through all my evidence, like we were preparing for the trial of the century. David handles all the company's legal work, but he also has a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in divorce court. Dad had called ahead and explained the situation, so David had already cleared his entire afternoon to deal with this crisis. David reviewed everything methodically: the emails, bank records, GPS logs, restaurant receipts, and hospital scheduling discrepancies. His assessment was immediate and brutal. The house is yours. Separate property purchased before marriage. With this level of documentation, we can move fast and protect everything you've worked for. His instructions were specific and immediate. I needed to secure all finances today, protect my assets, and document everything, but I couldn't confront anyone until the legal framework was completely in place. We had to be strategic about this, not emotional. First stop was the bank. I moved $98,000 from our joint account to my personal account, leaving exactly $6,000 so it wouldn't look like I was trying to hide assets. I also verified that my premarital investments, about $155,000 in retirement accounts and stocks, were properly documented as separate property that Victoria had no legal claim to. Dad also made some strategic calls while I was at the bank. He pulled Tyler's access to company accounts and vehicles effective immediately. He told Linda, the office manager, that Tyler was being reassigned to a different role and wouldn't need his company credit card, truck, or building access anymore. Tyler would find out Tuesday morning when his keycard didn't work and his truck wouldn't start. I blocked all our joint credit cards except one with a $2,500 limit, so Victoria couldn't go on a revenge spending spree when this all came out. I also removed Victoria as an authorized user on my personal credit cards. Every move was calculated to protect my assets while staying within legal boundaries. David made sure everything we did was completely legal and would hold up in court. That evening, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Tyler while she was in the shower. I'd been watching for exactly this kind of opportunity, and when I saw her phone light up on the nightstand, I grabbed it immediately. The message said, "Can't wait for tomorrow at Mom's. Dad's working late, so we'll have the place to ourselves again. Bring that thing you bought yesterday." Fresh evidence that the affair was ongoing and escalating. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it to David immediately. This was proof that they weren't just having some emotional affair. They were actively planning their next hookup and had been using my parents' house as their personal love nest. That's when I decided it was time to end this charade completely. I called Dad and asked him to set up a family dinner at my house for Friday night. He understood immediately what I was planning without me having to explain the details. He called Mom and Tyler separately, telling them it was a mandatory family dinner at Marcus's house. He said I had a big announcement and wanted the whole family there. He made it sound like good news, maybe a promotion, or Victoria being pregnant, or us buying a bigger house. I told Victoria about the dinner Wednesday night and watched her immediately tense up when I mentioned that Tyler would be there. She started asking nervous questions about what kind of announcement I was planning, why I was suddenly hosting family dinners when I usually avoided them, and whether she should cook something special. Her anxiety was written all over her face. "You'll find out Friday. Don't worry about cooking. I'll handle everything." I could see the panic in her eyes, but she couldn't ask too many questions without seeming suspicious. Friday afternoon, May 12th, I set up the dining room like a war room. I placed the divorce papers in a manila envelope at my seat, printed the most damaging emails in a larger envelope for Dad to read during dinner, and wrote out a certified check for $18,000 made out to Dad, the exact amount Mom had convinced him to lend Tyler for his financial crisis 3 years ago. Dad deserved his money back before this family imploded completely. Victoria spent the entire day nervous and jumpy, asking me a dozen times what this announcement was about. I just smiled and told her to be patient. For dinner, I made my famous ribeye steaks with chimichurri sauce, the same meal I'd been making for family gatherings for years. I wanted everything to seem completely normal until I dropped the hammer on all of them. Mom arrived first, giving me one of her fake hugs where she doesn't actually touch you. She immediately started asking where Victoria was and what this mysterious announcement was about. Dad just nodded at me with this knowing look. We both knew what was coming. Tyler showed up 25 minutes late, wearing his usual smug expression and a designer shirt that probably cost more than most people make in a day. He gave me one of those condescending brotherly shoulder pats that made me want to punch him right then and there. "So what's the big news, bro? Victoria finally pregnant? About time you two got your act together?" The way he said it, with that knowing smirk and the emphasis on finally, told me everything I needed to know. He thought he was winning some kind of game, that he'd outsmarted his older brother and gotten away with the perfect crime. He had no idea what was about to hit him. Victoria barely spoke during dinner, just pushed food around her plate, and kept glancing nervously between Tyler and me. Mom kept trying to make small talk about the weather and her church friends, but you could feel the tension in the room like electricity before a storm. After dinner, Dad raised his beer with a warm smile. "Well, son, what's this big announcement you wanted to share with the family?" I reached for the manila envelope and slid it across the table to Victoria. "Actually, I do have something very important to share with everyone. These are divorce papers." Dead silence filled the room. You could hear the air conditioning humming and a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. Victoria's face went ghost white, and her hands started shaking as she stared at the papers in front of her. What are you talking about, Marcus?" she stammered. Mom started her usual dramatic routine, placing her hand over her heart like she was having chest pains. "Marcus, what's gotten into you? You can't just—" "Save it, Mom." I cut her off and handed the second envelope to Dad. 4 months of emails between Mom and Victoria, planning Victoria's affair with Tyler. Mom's been covering the whole thing, using your golf schedule to coordinate their hookups at your house. Dad opened the envelope and started reading, even though he already knew what was inside. But seeing her actual words, reading how she'd betrayed our family, you could see his blood boiling with each page he turned. Tyler shot up so fast, his chair crashed backward into the wall behind him. "You went through her emails? That's illegal, you psycho. You can't use that in court." "Really? That's your main concern right now?" My voice was dead calm. "Not that you've been screwing my wife for 4 months?" Victoria's hands flew to her mouth. "Marcus, please, just listen to me." "Shut up, Victoria." I didn't even look at her. "Dad, read the part where Mom suggests using your golf schedule to plan their hookups." Mom lunged across the table for the papers, but Dad yanked them away from her reach. "Patricia, what the hell is this?" Dad's voice boomed through the house so loud, I thought the windows might rattle. Vincent, let me explain. Explain what? Dad was on his feet now, towering over everyone in the room. How you helped destroy our family? How you turned my own son against his brother? How you've been lying to my face for months? Mom's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. She started pointing at Victoria like this was all her fault. She came to me. She seduced Tyler. I was just trying to minimize the damage to the family. Tyler actually had the balls to smirk and shrug his shoulders. Come on, everyone needs to calm down. Marcus, you work 75 hours a week. Victoria needed attention and affection. I was there for her when you weren't. That's when I completely lost it. I walked around the table and punched him in the face with everything I had. I felt his nose cartilage crunch under my knuckles and blood exploded across his designer shirt. He went down hard and took the china cabinet with him, sending dishes crashing to the floor. Mom shrieked like someone was murdering her precious baby boy. Vincent, do something! Dad stood up slowly, all 6'4" and 225 pounds of him towering over everyone in the room. Get him outside now. Tyler was on the floor, blood streaming down his face and onto my hardwood floors. Dad, you can't just... I can do whatever I want. You're fired. You're cut off financially. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me. Vincent, he's your son. Mom was hyperventilating. Marcus is my son. Tyler proved tonight that blood doesn't mean shit when you betray family. Dad looked at the check, then at Tyler bleeding on my floor, then at Mom, who was still trying to help Tyler sit up. His eyes were cold as winter. Patricia, get your coat. We're leaving right now. You and I have some very serious shit to discuss at home. Victoria was sobbing hysterically. Marcus, the baby might be yours. After they left, Victoria and I sat in silence, surrounded by the wreckage. There was a broken chair, blood drops on my hardwood floor, divorce papers scattered across the table, and broken dishes everywhere. The dining room looked like a war zone. What happens now? She finally asked in a whisper. Now you pack whatever you can and get the hell out of my house. This place is mine. You have until tomorrow morning to figure out where you're going, but it won't be here. She nodded and went upstairs to pack. I sat alone at the dining table, feeling strangely peaceful for the first time in months. The truth was finally out, and everyone's masks had come off. For the first time since this nightmare began, I knew exactly where I stood and what I needed to do next. The divorce moved fast with all my evidence backing me up. Victoria tried to claim spousal support, but David shot that down immediately. Given the adultery documentation and her nursing income, she had no legal ground to stand on. Florida is a no-fault state, but adultery still matters when it comes to asset division and support calculations. She got her personal belongings, her Honda Civic, and absolutely nothing else from our 6 years of marriage. The paternity test confirmed what I already knew in my gut. The baby wasn't mine. That revelation was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant the family I'd been planning and dreaming about was never real. But liberating because it meant I could walk away completely clean with no ongoing obligations to these people who had betrayed me so thoroughly. Victoria moved in with Jessica, that traveling nurse who'd apparently been enabling the whole affair by covering for Victoria's fake work shifts and providing alibis. I heard through mutual friends that Jessica got sick of supporting Victoria and her pregnancy drama after about 7 weeks. Apparently, Victoria was impossible to live with, constantly crying, demanding attention, and expecting Jessica to pay for everything while she dealt with her self-created mess. Dad followed through on every single threat he'd made that night. Tyler was permanently fired from the company and banned from all job sites. But Dad didn't stop there. He also called around to other contractors in the Tampa area, and word travels fast in the construction business. Tyler became basically unemployable in the only industry he'd ever worked in, which wasn't much of a loss since he'd never been good at it anyway. Even better, Dad cut Tyler off financially in every possible way. No more Audi lease payments, no more credit cards, no more cash handouts when he got in trouble. For the first time in his entitled life, Tyler had to face real consequences with no safety net to catch him. 4 weeks after the confrontation, Tyler got arrested for driving on a suspended license with an expired registration. Turns out he'd been driving without insurance for months because he couldn't afford the payments anymore. He spent 3 nights in county jail before calling Dad to bail him out, but Dad refused. Let him figure it out himself. Maybe jail will teach him what 24 years of coddling couldn't. Victoria tried reaching out to me multiple times through text messages, emails, and even showed up at my work once demanding to talk. She wanted to work things through and get past our issues. I blocked her number after she sent a long email claiming the affair was really my fault for working too much and neglecting her emotional needs. Classic cheater logic. Somehow, it's always the betrayed person's fault for not being perfect enough to prevent being betrayed. But the biggest justice came from Dad's response to Mom's betrayal. He didn't just get angry, he got strategic and methodical, just like he approached everything else in his life. Turns out Dad had been suspicious of Mom's spending and attitude for months before this all came out. After learning the truth about her role in orchestrating the affair, he had David audit all their finances going back 3 years. Dad found that Mom had been secretly funding Tyler's lifestyle to the tune of about $3,500 a month for over a year. There were credit cards Dad didn't know about, cash withdrawals from accounts she wasn't supposed to access, and even a second mortgage on their house that she'd somehow managed to get approved without Dad's knowledge. She'd been stealing from the family business to support Tyler's expensive habits while Dad was working 60-hour weeks to build something for the family. Dad filed for divorce 7 weeks after my dinner party. At 58 years old, he was completely done enabling Mom's entitled behavior and Tyler's failures. He'd spent decades trying to make their marriage work, but discovering that she'd actively helped destroy mine was the final straw. Mom lost her shit when she realized Dad was serious about cutting her off and wasn't going to forgive and forget like he had so many times before. The divorce was absolutely brutal. Dad kept the construction company, the main house, and most of their assets. Mom had to get a job for the first time in 16 years and ended up working retail at Target, making $13 an hour, dealing with customers who treated her the same way she'd treated service workers her whole life. Tyler moved in with her in a shitty 2-bedroom apartment across town. He tried crawling back to Dad multiple times, always claiming he wanted to apologize and ask for his job back. Dad's response never changed. You made your choice when you betrayed your brother. Live with the consequences like a man for once in your life. Last I heard, Tyler was working overnight shifts at Home Depot, making barely above minimum wage, unloading trucks and stocking shelves. The guy who used to drive a leased Audi and think manual labor was beneath him was now doing the exact kind of work he'd spent years avoiding. The irony was absolutely perfect. Victoria gave birth to a daughter and is struggling as a single mom living in a 1-bedroom apartment. She's working extra shifts to pay for daycare, and from what I understand through mutual acquaintances, she's barely making ends meet. The comfortable life she threw away for a few months of excitement with Tyler is long gone, and reality has hit her hard. A few months ago, Mom and Tyler showed up at my house unannounced with the most audacious request I've ever heard in my life. They wanted me to take responsibility for Victoria's daughter, give her my last name, pay child support, and help with expenses. But that wasn't even the most ridiculous part. They also wanted me to pay Tyler's legal fees so he could get back on his feet and supposedly become a better person. Their logic was that family is family, that past mistakes should be forgiven for the child's sake, and that I was the only one with stable income to handle the responsibility. The sheer balls it took to make that request still amazes me. Here's Mom standing on my doorstep. Marcus, be the bigger man here. That little girl needs a father figure, and you're the only one who can provide stability. I told them both to get the hell off my property and never come back. I said I wouldn't pay a penny for their mistakes or take any responsibility for the consequences of their choices. They destroyed our family with their lies and betrayal, and I wasn't about to let them destroy my future too by saddling me with obligations that weren't mine. I called the cops and had them both trespassed from my property. The officer who responded said he'd seen this kind of family drama before and told me I was smart to document everything and cut contact completely. He said too many people get manipulated into taking responsibility for situations they didn't create. It's been 9 months since that dinner party changed everything. I won't lie. The first few months were rough as hell. I felt like I was starting over at 33, questioning everything I'd believed about family, loyalty, and trust. But cutting out the toxic people made room for better things to grow in my life. Dad and I are closer than we've ever been. He made me a full partner in the business with a 42% ownership stake, and we're looking at expanding into commercial development in Orlando and maybe even Miami. The company's pulling in more money than ever, partly because we don't have Tyler's dead weight dragging us down and causing problems with clients. Turns out when you remove incompetent people from your organization, productivity and profitability increase dramatically. I started dating again about 7 months after the divorce was final. I met Rebecca at a work conference in Atlanta, and she's everything Victoria wasn't. She's an architect who specializes in medical facilities and commercial developments, so we actually have common ground professionally. She's smart, ambitious, has her own money and her own career goals. She doesn't need anyone to take care of her, which is refreshing after dealing with Victoria's constant need for attention and validation. Rebecca is the complete opposite of Victoria in every way that matters. She's financially independent, emotionally mature, and honest about her intentions and feelings. We've been taking things slow, but I can see a real future with her that's based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than dependency and manipulation. I still get updates about Tyler and Victoria through mutual acquaintances in the construction and medical communities. Tyler's apparently had 5 different jobs in 9 months because he still thinks he's above manual work and entitled to respect he hasn't earned. He keeps getting fired for showing up late, complaining about working conditions, and having a bad attitude with supervisors. Victoria posted on social media asking for donations to help with baby expenses, but she got dragged in the comments by people who knew the whole story. Apparently, word got around about what she'd done, and the nursing community in Tampa isn't very forgiving of people who destroy families and manipulate situations for personal gain. Mom tried reaching out through Dad a few times, wanting to reconcile for the family's sake and asking when this punishment was going to end. She still doesn't understand that this isn't punishment. These are simply the natural consequences of her choices. Dad shuts her down every time, telling her she made her choice when she helped destroy her son's marriage, and now she gets to live with those consequences just like everyone else. The lesson here isn't complicated, but it took me 33 years and a destroyed marriage to learn it properly. When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses for them, don't rationalize their behavior, and don't give them endless second chances to prove they're better than their actions suggest. Family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, respect, and having each other's backs when things get tough. Tyler and Mom failed that test spectacularly when they chose to prioritize their own selfish desires over family bonds and basic human decency. Dad and I passed it by standing together when the truth came out and refusing to enable toxic behavior just because it came from family members. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, while the people who screwed you over face the natural consequences of their choices. I didn't have to plot elaborate schemes or spend years trying to get back at them. Tyler, Victoria, and Mom are all paying the price for their decisions every single day, and that's enough justice for me. Tyler went from thinking he was some kind of executive to working overnight shifts at a big box store. Victoria went from having a stable marriage and financial security to struggling as a single mom in a one-bedroom apartment. Mom went from living off Dad's success to working retail and dealing with the same customers she used to look down on. They created their own hell, and I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. I'm not saying I don't think about it sometimes, or that it doesn't still hurt when I remember how completely they betrayed my trust. But I've learned that holding onto anger and resentment only hurts you. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't make the people who wronged you suffer any more than they already are from their own poor choices. The most important thing I've learned is that you can't control other people's actions, but you can control how you respond to them. I could have spent years trying to get revenge, or I could have let them manipulate me into taking responsibility for their mistakes. Instead, I documented everything, protected my assets, cut them out of my life completely, and focused on building something better with the people who actually deserved my time and energy. My relationship with Dad is stronger than it's ever been because we went through this crisis together and came out the other side with a deeper understanding of what really matters. Our business is thriving because we're both focused on the same goals and don't have to deal with dead weight anymore. My relationship with Rebecca is built on honesty and mutual respect because I learned what red flags to watch for and what kind of person I actually want in my life. If there are any guys out there reading this who recognize some of these warning signs in their own relationships, don't ignore them. Trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to investigate when things don't add up. The temporary discomfort of facing the truth is always better than living a lie that will eventually destroy you anyway. And if you discover that people you trusted have betrayed you, remember that their actions say everything about their character and nothing about your worth. Cut them out, protect yourself legally and financially, and focus on building something better with people who actually deserve to be in your life. The people who matter will stick around when things get tough. The people who don't matter will show you exactly who they are when they think they can get away with it. Believe them and move on accordingly.